Welcome back to the Within Her Soul podcast. We are so excited today. It's just me, it's just Jordan today, but I have Sheyenne Knox with me today, and we just felt like it was going to be such a good idea to have someone come in today and talk on a topic that really is kind of sensitive. And I struggle very much with this, so much that in counseling, I was led to a book all about it because I needed some serious help in this area. But when thinking about this, I couldn't think of a better person to talk about it just because I know her personal story. And that's really on forgiveness and what it's all about, how to forgive someone that is biologically supposed to be a security for you, a comfort for you, and it didn't happen in that way. And so we're going to hear a lot about her story today. But if you're struggling with forgiveness, someone that you really love, parent figure, maybe it was a best friend or a sibling or a child even, if there's anything that you're struggling with when it comes to forgiveness, I think this episode will be really healing for you. And I'm super, super excited to have Sheyenne with me, have you with me and talk about this. It's going to be real. We're not perfect in this area and none of us are Jesus, unfortunately, but we know that he was perfect and we can learn from him. And so I hope that's what you guys get from this. So Sheyenne, if you want to introduce yourself, kind of just share a little bit about you and your testimony, and we'll just dive in.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about this, and it's like, oh shoot, it's darn that you thought of me to speak about this, but it's like, well, I wish I had a different story, but then again, I don't at the same time.
Yeah.
This is a huge part of my life. It's a huge part of my testimony, and I feel like looking at that bigger picture now, walking through it, I wouldn't have felt this way, but on the other side of it, I'm like, okay, if I went through it, I may as well use it and share it. And I think that's why the Lord brings us through these things, is to be able to be a voice to others and show people, okay, this is a part of your story, but it is not your story. It is not only what your life is going to look like, and you can use it for good, truly. And I feel like I kind of have at this point in my life. Growing up, I have always had a present father. I've always had an incredible father, but my mother wasn't necessarily the same situation, unfortunately. I had a big family, grew up with 4 older siblings. I was the baby by like a long shot. If anybody is like, yeah, I have a lot of siblings, but I felt like an only child, that was me. I had a pretty normal like childhood up until about kindergarten. And that's when my parents got divorced. My mom discovered drinking, and things just kind of started going downhill from there. It felt like all of her past traumas that she didn't ever deal with, which is why I'm so loud about breaking generational curses and being aware of what your family went through, because you're going to carry it if you don't decide to put a stop to it. And so she never walked through her trauma ever, and it became ours. And, she discovered drinking, and it very quickly started taking over her life, and not only her life, but our life.
Yeah.
It became our family's identity of, is she going to come home and is she going to cause a fight? Is it going to be, another issue? Is it going to be our fault? Is it going to turn into something else? And it was like living every single day on eggshells. That's how it felt. And as I grew up and went from elementary school to middle school and started having life problems and realizing, that, when we're really little, we don't understand what's going on. And I still looked at my mom as if she hung the moon. And then it was like one by one, like my heart started breaking just a little bit more, because you're let down again and let down again and let down again. And then it was like you start seeing all of your friends and their relationships with their parents and what their parents do, and their moms coming to the PTA meeting and their parents showing up to the soccer games and all that stuff. And then it was like one after another, I started realizing my parental relationship isn't the same as everyone else's.
Yeah.
Then I start going through the trauma of like what it feels like, of like, is it my fault? Is there something wrong with me? Did I do something? Why doesn't my mom show up to these things? And then it's like, okay, then I started walking through, why am I not enough for her to choose me over drinking or choose me over going out? Or, and then as my parents split up and I had to walk through this by myself, and all my siblings were so much older than me, they moved on and they were getting married and having children. And I'm over here like, does anybody see me? I'm like left in the dust back here. Then CPS getting involved and having to deal with that. And I'm like, can I just have a normal life for once? Like, can I just not have to deal with who's going to come pull me out of class to talk to me about what's going on at home? And am I going to not have friends or teachers start calling CPS about what's going on with this and what happened here? And are you alone? Are you this? And I'm just like, how is this my story? And then the biggest thing that I started to walk through as I was, becoming a teenager, I actually moved out. I couldn't deal with the trauma. I couldn't deal with just the drinking and the walking on eggshells. And like, there's only so long you can deal with that. And then I started walking through okay, this is just the cards that I'm dealt. This is what my life is going to look like. This is just how it is. It's never going to be different. I'm just going to have to deal with it. I'm going to probably grow up just like her. I'm going to turn out just like her. And it wasn't until I went to college and I went to church for the very first time, like actually on my own and not being brought there or brought there with a friend. Like it was my first decision to go, that I started, actually truly listening to the preacher preach on certain messages. And I'm like, okay, wait, this isn't actually my story. This doesn't have to be the way that it is. I don't have to bear this. I don't have to wear this. I don't have to walk in this. And that was around the time that I started to honestly become resentful. It was like, okay, I don't have to deal with this anymore. I don't have to be a part of this. I'm just going to cut it off. And I don't know if any of you guys have that trauma response of, oh, it affects me. Pull out the scissors, cut it off. I'm done with it. And I stopped talking to her completely. And then I never healed from it. I chose to be resentful. I chose to just cut it off and avoid it and not think about it and not touch it and do everything else, but focus on what I came from. And that only lasted for so long. It was like putting tape over a busted pipe. It's like, okay, this will stick for a little bit, and then it didn't. And then I started just walking through every emotion, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. It's like the resentment, the anger, the abandonment, the feeling of why am I not good enough, then resentment again, then anger again. And as I'm sitting here speaking to you guys now, I've gone to counseling. I have sought wise counsel. I've walked through so many things that have helped me heal. I actually launched my own podcast that Jordan actually helps me with. It's all come full circle for me to be able to say now I'm in that stage of like, I've forgiven her for what she's done. I didn't forget it. It's still there. It's still always going to be there. But now I can walk in that phase of I pray for her now, and I pray for her healing, and I pray for her to be able to open her eyes one day and see what I see in her, but I don't walk in that resentment. I don't walk in feeling like, why did I deserve this? It's more of, I went through it, I've walked through it. It's not my story, but it's now my story to tell, to be able to help other people know that it's not you, it's them, but we can walk in freedom one day too.
That is literally so good. Yeah. And we'll make sure to link your podcast at the bottom of this, because she talks also a lot of just really good empowerment and just real life stuff as well. Our podcasts are very similar in all the best ways. And so, yeah. Okay. So back up to that resentment, because I think sometimes it's just funny because I relate to this so much. Like when someone does me wrong, instead of being like, where are they at right now? Like what have they gone through that made them react that way? I'm like, how dare you? That's being added to my list of things that you've done wrong in my life. It's like the worst flaw about myself. Like something about counseling is like, you really start to see how you're really not all high and mighty. And like, you really are sometimes a problem. Like, the drama. Yes.
The drama. Yes.
The drama. But something that I realized that like, I take pride in some things that I've learned and done. But one of my biggest things is if you've done me wrong and you've deeply hurt me, it takes me a lifetime for me to forgive you. And if that does happen, the forgiveness has to come when you ask for it. And let me tell you guys, this is something that is detrimental to your spiritual walk, because you now hold these like collection of grudges. You think that you're better than other people. And when you go to interact with those people again, the enemy, there is a distance, there's a block, not just between a relationship setting, but between your heart for people, your heart for, and this is why in dating relationships, I was so emotionally damaged every single time. I felt like I couldn't really give myself and feel confident in who I was. There's so many ties that goes with forgiveness. And so I want to kind of back up to that and say, what kind of areas of your life were broken because you carried so much anger or resentment towards your mom for this, because I think you were young. I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of chuckled, not in a bad way, but you're like, my childhood was normal till kindergarten. I'm like, honey, that was 4 years of your entire life. I'm like, no, like it just breaks my heart. But like, truly, like, what are some areas that you had to battle with going through that season, whether it was in school or just that anger that had to be filled in within you until you finally had that revelation? I don't know,
Yeah.
like, what was that like for you?
I think it was normal because I don't remember it. I was so little, I don't remember it. That's why I say it's normal till kindergarten, you know?
Yeah.
But looking back, and it's crazy when you have to like relive this stuff and start like thinking back. And like I've done so many episodes of my own podcast where I've
Yeah.
actually had to dig deep, and I'm like, I blocked that out. I don't even remember that whole phase of my life. And
Mm,
my siblings will call me and talk about something, and I'm like, wait, that happened? And they're like,
trauma.
yeah, that happened. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I must have just, blocked it out. But when I think back to really even elementary school. Like I think the biggest thing that I held on to was like as a girl, like a young girl, every phase of my life that I've walked through, like you need your mom. Like you want your mom, like to talk about relationships and friendships and people who hurt you, and like it's just a connection that I feel like you can't get from anything else. And so I just remember like the earliest memories of resentment that I had was looking at my friends and them having moms that were present. Like
Mm,
that is something still to this day that hurts me because I'm
yeah.
like, I'm 24. In the next few years of my life, I'm going to be getting married and having children. If that's the plan, God willing, I hope it
Yeah.
is. But I'm like,
You'll be a mom for sure.
I'll be a mom. And then I start thinking,
Yeah.
like, I don't have my mom to be like, when I have
Yeah.
my child, who do you want to call when your baby's awake and you can't get him to go to sleep? Your mom. Who do you
Yeah.
call when you have laundry questions? Your
Yeah.
mom. Like, I live through all of those things, and I think about people and hearing their stories of them with their mom or on Mother's Day. Oh, Mother's Day really gets you
Yeah.
because you see all these people talking about their moms and their relationships and all these pictures. And I'm like, I don't have those memories. Like when I
Yeah.
think of my mother, I think of everything that I shouldn't think of, like everything
Pain.
that
It's
doesn't
just painful.
feel good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so carrying that resentment into relationships, it's like I looked at my friends differently. I looked
Mm,
at their relationships with their mothers differently. Like I would just get so angry and feel so tense about stuff that normally people would look at and be happy about. It made me angry. And then
mm,
you see people like as I start walking into relationships, I'm like I cling to like I remember my last relationship of 6 years. His mother, I tried to make her my mother. I'm
mm.
like, okay, she'll take care of you, she'll take care of me. And I'm like, that sets them up for so much failure. And I put so
Mhm.
many different expectations on them than I would put on someone else.
And you stay longer than you needed to if you weren't
Uh-huh. Yeah.
connected. Yeah. Been there.
I hung on to like the family aspect of it. I think
Yeah.
I looked at that relationship more of like a therapy session than an actual relationship. I'm like,
Yeah.
can I fit into this family somehow? And I
Yeah.
never noticed it in the moment. And it's like even friendships, like I look at a lot of my friendships, all my friends are like nearly 10 years older than I am.
Wow.
And I'm like, is that because they're like maternal to me?
You were like longing for to
Yeah, I'm like,
be,
not any of
yeah.
my friends are my age, none of them.
Yeah.
All of them are married with children, and I'm like, am I looking at them because I can look
Mm.
up to them? I can cling to that. See, this is therapy session in itself.
Yeah. But if you think about it, you didn't relate to anyone your age because you only saw them getting to be a child. Ooh, this is real though. You got to see them being a child and you didn't get that. And I know your
No.
dad's absolutely amazing. So like I see all your stories about him. I'm like, ugh,
And he wasn't around though. Like he
right.
was out of state working. I only saw him
You
like
were,
during the
with your
summer.
mom. So you didn't get to be a child. So you being around other children made you uncomfortable because you didn't relate to them anymore. You kind of had to become an adult for yourself. You just had to grow up really fast. Totally makes
And
sense.
I know that's a lot of people's
Yeah.
story. Like, and
Yeah.
I've never even put that two and two together right there. We just made a
Yeah.
little connection over
Yeah.
that. But it's like I never went to parties. I never did what teenagers did. I never did what all the other kids did, and I didn't find joy in it. And I think it's because I'm like, is this how it's supposed to be? Like, is this what I'm
Yeah.
supposed to do as a child? Like, and people look at me now, and me and my boyfriend now talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh my gosh. He was like, what do you like to do for fun? And I was like, I'm just so like in the moment. I don't know what I like to do. I don't like adventure. I don't like doing this. I
Yeah.
don't like going out. I don't like partying. Like I don't like doing any of those things. And I was like, I like to cook. I like to clean. I like to be at home. I like to feel like peace. Like I like to feel like I can create a home for people. I like to take care of people. That's what I like to do for fun. And I'm like, is this my trauma showing through?
But like you didn't get that. You didn't get that. So you recreated which okay, in all
Yes.
honesty, this is what we do for ourselves. You know, like
Yeah.
whenever we lack something, we created ourselves and we just kind of obsess over it. And it's a defense mechanism, and we
Uh-huh.
know that. But like, wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy though. Like how all of that ties in together. And it's
Mhm.
still manifesting in your life today, which just shows you the impact of these type of hurts. And I think this is also why when it comes to
Yeah.
forgiveness, it does have a heavier weight to it when it is a parent. And I know we've in the beginning of this episode we
Oh
talked
yeah.
about, like, it might be a sibling, it might be a child, it might be a friend, but with parents, those are the two people, typically two, if you have stepdad or stepmom, it could be multiple, but like these are the people that you're allowed to, I don't know, you just like put all your trust in them, and if you get let
Right.
down, it just hurts so much more. And I think parent hurt
Mhm.
is one of those things that takes a long, long time to heal from. And I know this goes, excuse me, with like kids that are adopted, and they're like, they carry that
Mhm.
resentment for so long of like, how could you give me up? Or the divorce people who have parents that divorce, and then they're just like never told or talked to about. Like there's so much hurt that
Yeah.
comes with our parents. And I was actually reading a book that was given to me, like I said, in therapy, and it said that forgiveness is really just dismissing a debt. And when I heard this, I was like, okay, when you dismiss a debt, it's not that the debt wasn't ever there, because to dismiss it, it has to be there. It has to be like
Yeah.
obviously acknowledged. But to dismiss
Mhm.
it, that means they no longer pay you anything. And I kind of did this whole like look back of my life, and I'm like, I could tell you all the things that people have done to me. It's really bad. And I think I do it because I'm just like longing to not be hurt by somebody, because I never want to hurt anyone. And so I do this like
Yeah.
reverse role where like I would never do that to you. So why'd you do it to me? I'm writing it in my log of things that you just
Yep.
did so terribly. And it's like, honestly, that's so crippling, because what you just explained was a bitter heart. Whenever you started looking at your friends and you're like, I see your families and things like that, and it causes me resentment, not because they don't have amazing families or they're amazing people. It's like you should be happy for them, but because of our pain, we have bitterness rooted. And isn't that what the enemy wants more? Because broken relationships cause us into loneliness, into
Mhm.
solitude, into isolation. Therefore, he can have his way, because we know when two are gathered together, like we're in community with Christ. And so it was one of those moments for me where looking at forgiveness as a whole, and like I don't have any deep parent wounds. I did lose my dad at 20. So even the Father's Day, things like that, like there's bitterness in my heart more through
Oh yeah.
grief, but I had to forgive the things that I didn't get to do, the things that I regretted in his last days, like those little things. And when I let all of that go, there really is freedom. There was like such a release of like, okay, I can't change anything. I can't fix anything, but releasing all of that debt and all of those grudges and all of those things I held on to changed everything for me. It really was. It was like a fresh breath of air, really.
Yeah. So I have a story about that too. So in last January, actually, our pastor and during our church service was like, we're going to do new through 30, and it's reading the New Testament in 30 days. And I was like, okay, I like a good challenge. I need to read the Bible. Let's do it. So I read the New Testament in 30 days, and I got to Mark chapter 11, and I skipped it. And why did I skip it? That's because it is about forgiveness. And I'm going to read you guys the
Doesn't
Bible
it
verse.
say in the title like
Uh-huh.
forgiving and prayer or something?
Forgiveness and prayer.
Yeah.
Yep. And I said, I'm gonna like skim this for a
This
second
is
and
not
skip
for
on over
me
it.
right now.
And I should have brought my Bible since y'all can see it here. It's like all this highlighted stuff. I'm annotating it. That entire chapter is not highlighted,
That
and it
is
was
so funny.
completely skipped over because it was like that conviction of like, if I read it, I'll have to know, and I'm just gonna act like the wind
Yeah.
blew the page over. So it says, and whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive your trespasses. But, big old but, if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses. And I was like, okay, so I skipped it. Well, I got baptized in, I want to say June, sometime around there. I probably should know that. No, no, no. It was on Easter. It was on Easter. Okay, yeah, not June.
Like April.
Got baptized on Easter. And we do a Bible study before we got baptized. Me and my boyfriend did it together. And we're at his house and we're talking. We've probably been in Bible study for like an hour and a half. And he said, before we close up, I want you to turn to Mark chapter 11. And immediately I was like, oh no, because he just got
I'm to the bathroom.
Yeah, I was like, can I go somewhere else? He was like, you can't go into baptism with having this stuff on your heart. You can't be bitter. You can't have unforgiveness. Like, this is your fresh, clean slate. And I don't want you to go into this with that stuff because you'll try to come out with it too. And we start reading it, and I immediately start bawling because I'm like, okay, Lord, I see you. I tried to avoid it, and now it's right back here. And it just hit me differently
Yeah.
because he said something to me that I'll never forget. And he said, I'm not saying that you have to forgive what they did, but what you do have to do is you have to forgive them for doing it to you. He was like, no one is perfect. We are not Jesus, like you said at the beginning. We're not. But you can't live with that and wear that, or you will never be able to walk in freedom.
Yeah.
And I made him cry, I made everybody cry. I was bawling. I went through like a whole box of tissues because I had never in my life sat down and thought about forgiving her. It was never even a thought in my mind because I'm like, I can move on. I'm never going to talk to her again. I don't have to deal with this. But really, as y'all heard, my whole entire life was changed and altered because of my unforgiveness. I was bitter. I was resentful. I was angry. I looked at maternal relationships as a negative thing. And I'm like, they're probably going to hurt you. There's probably things behind the scenes. And I'm like, it's not like that. It was like that for me, but it's not like that for everyone.
Yeah.
And so it's important to know that walking in forgiveness, I feel so much freer now than I ever did. And now I look at it differently because I'd actually see my mom this past weekend for the first time in 3 years. I knew my sister was getting married from the year prior, and every single day it felt like I thought about it one time. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just here. What am I going to say? Like, I was just like, there was so much going through my mind. And I actually saw her. And here I was standing, this happened a couple of days ago, and I didn't feel angry.
Wow.
I wasn't angry. I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, I don't want to talk to her because I'm so mad. I just felt so sad. Like, I was just so sad for her. And I just, think about that forgiveness, and I'm like, I've forgiven her. But now I'm like, I wonder, all I could think about was how she felt.
Wow.
And I was like, imagine being our mother, because all four of us, for the first time since my mom's 50th birthday, which was 6 years ago, it was the first time we were all together. And I'm like, imagine how horrible she feels.
Yeah.
And the weight and the guilt of what she's done, that she has to be here and face us for the first time. Yeah. And I was like, that is forgiveness. The fact that I can feel so sad for her and guilty for her and just feel the weights that she must feel, and not for a second think of how angry I was with her or think about what she had done. Like, none of that had passed me. And the only words we said were, I love you. Wow. I stood next to her and we took a family picture, and I was like, okay, well, I have to talk to her now. And I'm like, my wheels are spinning. I'm like, I don't even know what to say. And she just said, I love you. And I said, I love you too. And that was it. Wow. And so for those of you listening that feel like, there may be some of you that are just like, I will never forgive. Like, there's no way I could ever, and that's okay. And you may sit in that for a while, and no one's telling you have to do it right now. It's not a perfect walk. And there's not just oh, you're just going to flip a switch. Because people used to tell me all the time, what if she passes away? You'll never be able to live with yourself because you never forgave her. And I do believe that, but I think that it's a journey that you're going to have to walk on. But as you start walking through that, you'll know when it's time. But I can tell you there's so much freedom in just forgiving what they've done, forgiving them, but not forgiving them for what they've done to you.
Yeah. And it's crazy because isn't that, we pray all the time, like, Jesus, help us be more like you, teach us your ways and all these things. And it's like, that is a perfect example of like what forgiveness does in your heart. Like, your heart posture completely changed, because it would be so easy to see the one person who literally changed the way your life was going to become. Now, granted, you've become an extraordinary person because of what happened. But at the same time, you were able to take that scenario and have compassion and
Mhm.
empathy and like all these things. And it's like, that is where Jesus really does manifest into our hearts and we become him in those ways. And I just like, that's incredible. It's truly amazing. And something else I wanted to share because I think it's really interesting is one of my pastors said, the things that you cry about, I know you were saying like you had this full on, breakdown, all the things, the things that you cry about are things that God is most likely going to use you for. And I heard that and I was like, ooh, I was like, that is so true because the things that we've gone through and the things that we struggle with really do help other people also find the path of Jesus. And I think that's why our testimonies are so important. God doesn't necessarily want these things to happen. He doesn't want you not to have a relationship with your mom, but he is such a good father that he turns those situations into good and he allows you to build character throughout it. And
Yeah.
so now if you're in this situation like Sheyenne where you're like, I'm honestly just tired. I'm tired of carrying this resentment. I'm tired of being so angry. I really do encourage you to go pray about it and just give it all. We have a soul assignment today that I think is going to be super helpful, but go give it all and pretend that you're actually putting it at an altar. Like pretend that you are at the altar or the foot of the cross and just lay it out because, and I've done this so many times and I've done it recurring times. I know we don't necessarily have to keep doing it, but if you see yourself collecting all those grudges again and writing out those things that they did over and over and over again, keep releasing it because there will be a day where you have a moment like Sheyenne where you're like, whoa, I'm now feeling what they feel. It's no
Mhm.
longer about me, but what they feel. And that's how you know you really have healed. And I don't think it's just like a perfect healing, like Sheyenne said, it's a gradual process, but it's amazing to have that freedom and release from bitterness. I mean, really all things that are evil, because those are the things that stir up in us when we do have unforgiveness, which is why I think the Lord is so stern on forgiveness, so serious enough that he said, if you don't, I won't forgive you. And that's kind of like red flag for us. We're like, hold up. I don't want to be that. I don't want to not be forgiven. And so it's really good. So good.
And that Bible verse reading it almost hits you the same as when like the Lord says like if you don't stand up for me in front of your people, I'll spit you out
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Whoa. Okay, stop yelling." Like it was such a strong conviction for me.
Yeah.
And I see now, like I said in the moment I would have never understood that, but I look at the bigger picture now, how much of that has affected my life and
Yeah.
how much I'd worn that and thought that I wasn't good enough and listened to what the enemy said to me and made me believe it that that was just the cards I was dealt and I was just going to live that life and I was probably going to be the mother just like she was. Like I'm not made to bear all of that.
No.
That the Lord can handle that. I'm going to give it away because he said he can handle
That's
it.
why he died in the first place, truly, is to carry all the things that we naturally want to carry. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
And it's
that's so good.
exhausting. It's so
So
exhausting.
exhausting.
Golly. I'm like,
And especially like almost being 30, and I know we have an age gap, but like almost being 30 and thinking about all the things that I've worried about for my whole 20s, there is some of this like nostalgia of like, what was I thinking? Like, why could I not have had the relationship with Jesus now than I did, or the relationship I have with Jesus now? I wish I could have had it when I was younger because, and that's also why I'm so passionate about this podcast because I'm like, if younger women can understand the true power of Jesus in your life,
yeah.
you will live a life of peace and joy no matter what is thrown at you. And that sounds impossible sometimes with the world that we live in, but that is how powerful his love is for us. And so that's just a perfect example though of someone who literally has gone through just horrible things. And I know there's more things you've gone through that you didn't even share today, but
Or remember.
or very true. You know what's crazy? Whenever I went through the most traumatic time, and I talked about this on our grief episode with my dad, I did not even remember till like this past year. And that vision came up in me, and I was
Yep.
like, wait, what? I was like, that's not what I played in my head. I thought that person did this, and then that person did that, and it was actually completely reversed. So that's
Uh-huh.
like real stuff. Like you really will create new dialogues in your head and like new things that actually happen, even though
Yep.
that's not how it happened at all. Because when you're so young and you don't know how to process things, that's some real stuff. Okay, so let's go into our soul scriptures. We actually have 3 of them today for you, and then we'll go into our soul assignment. But one of our first scriptures, it's kind of like one of those like also smack in the face ones for me, but it's Matthew 18:21 through 22. And it says, then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times, which is funny to me because I think sometimes we go to God and we're like, hey, like if I do it 7 times, is that good enough? Like if I just do it like this, are we good? Are we all good? But he says, no, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. And really, he's still not putting like a limit to this, but he's being kind of sarcastic of like, you think it's just 7, but I'm telling you to 10x that and it's going to be 77. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another reminder that it's ongoing. Is that 10x? I don't think that is. Yeah. I was like, is that 700? I was like, wait a second. But yeah, there is no limit to forgiving. It is a ongoing thing every single time, no matter how many times they've done it. Mm-hmm. That one stuck with me because I'm like a 2, 3 kind of thing. I'm actually forgiving in some areas, but once you've done it to me 2 or 3 times, I'm like, you are on my hit list. I am done with you and everyone's going to know what you've done to me. Like I get revengeful. And so the Lord's really healing me of that. But yeah, 77 times. Keep on forgiving. There's no limit to it. So that one's really one of my favorites.
I love it. So this next one is amazing and not necessarily one of those smack in the face, but it's so simple that it's so clear. It's talking for those of you that struggle not having that parent or struggle with saying, how am I supposed to do all of this life without having those people with me that are supposed to be my parents, right? It's Psalm 27:10. It says, for my father and my mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me in. And what this means to me is growing up, I can remember all the things that I went through and all of the really traumatic scenarios. I wasn't raised in church. I never was brought to church. I never was really talked about, Jesus. My mom used to always talk to me about her church hurt that she had. And that's the only example of church that I had. Wow. And in those moments, I vividly remember just starting to pray. When I was fearful, when I was afraid, like I can remember in the car when she would be driving with me drunk. While driving in the car, I would just close my eyes and pray because there was nothing I could do. I couldn't change the situation, but I just sat there and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. I don't even think I knew how to pray or what a good example was of a prayer other than you end it in amen. I just spoke. I just like talked in my mind. And so I knew even in those moments without anyone telling me that he was there for me. I didn't have my mother to be there for me. I didn't have examples of people. I didn't have people around me that could help me. I knew automatically to go to him. And so lean on him because he is there for you and he wants to love you and care for you and walk you through this. And I promise you, as much as you try, you cannot do it alone.
If that's not proof that God is real, that our human instinct in panic or fear is instantly to ask for help when you haven't ever been introduced to that power or that being before. Like people say like they don't think there's a God and things like that. I'm like, like when you're in danger, your immediate response is to ask for help from God. And it's like because we came from him. Like our natural instinct is to go back to our creator because we feel the most comfort with him. Like it's that's so good. Our last one is Ephesians 4:31-32. And it says, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you. So one of those verses that, again, it's like, there's nothing that's left out of here. There's nothing that's like, oh, okay, well, it didn't say that one. Literally any ill feeling that you have towards somebody it falls into one of these categories. And it's just a reminder that really you will be better off by releasing all of that. And like I said, laying it at the foot of the altar and going about with that tender-hearted heart posture, because really forgiveness is for you. It's not necessarily for the other person. It is 1000% for yourself, because truly at the end of the day, the Lord is going to take care of all of the injustices in the world. We try to take on those on ourselves, and we truly cannot bear those. We know God is a just God, and everyone has to stand before the judgment throne. So release all of those things that you're trying to solve yourself, or having those revengeful thoughts, and wanting to get payback and all the things. Like, just give that back to God and just focus on the forgiving part on your own self. And if it's not already an example through our stories, go see how God just changes in your own life and certain areas of your life, and how joy and peace and love all come flooding back into your hearts, because I know we all want to live that way. We don't want to live with anger. No one truly enjoys that. Some people might act like they enjoy that and that
Yeah.
that's part of their identity, but it's truly not the best way to go. And so
I'll say one thing too, one last thing that I feel like has helped me walk in being easier to forgive people, because I'm a lot like you. I'm like, oh, you did me wrong, you're done.
yeah,
One day I'm gonna be praying for forgiveness for something I regret and something that I
mm,
should have not done and something that I'm living with. And it's the biggest reminder ever, because I ask for forgiveness on a lot of things. I don't think it has to be a large thing to ask for forgiveness for.
absolutely.
But I have to learn to give grace, because I'm going to be walking through that one day and we're not perfect. And the same thing that I'm asking for forgiveness for someone else of what they've done to me, someone else is praying that probably to something I've done to them.
That's
And
true.
it gives you a little bit more grace to understand that, like, we all do things we regret. We all say things we regret. We do things without the intention of hurting somebody, and it
Yeah,
does. So it gives you a little bit more grace to be able to forgive what others have done to you.
that's so good. That's so good.
But I'm excited to do this soul assignment here
Yeah, yeah. Share
because,
about what you've done, and then share with what they can do as well.
yeah, so something that I did when I actually left my mom, I was 17 years old, junior in high school. I wanted to get everything out. And if you're like me and not confrontational, this is really why I did it, was because I couldn't actually say it to her face. I couldn't actually let my feelings out because I would just cry. That's what I do when I let my feelings out. There's no words, it's just tears. I wrote it down. I wrote the longest letter ever. If I would have had something to type it, I would have rather done that for how much I wrote. But I let out everything I'd ever felt, everything I'd ever held on, every emotion I was feeling, everything that I wanted to speak out. It probably wasn't the most friendly, and I probably do regret some of the things that I said, but it was honest, it was real, and it was raw. And I left it on the table when I left. And it was so freeing be able to get all of the things I'd ever wanted to say out, because now my trauma response is when someone starts speaking to me and I can tell that there's tension, I just shut down and don't speak. And I know that that's where that came from. It was a way for me to get it out. Now, I gave it to her, but not everyone is in that same scenario. Maybe you don't have your parent here anymore and you're not even able to give it to them. Whatever you're walking through and whoever it may be, it can be healing to just get it out. Now, I do recommend going to counseling and actually getting it out to someone who can help you, but
Sure.
writing out those feelings, there's a lot of things you'll write down that you would never actually speak or think. It just comes out when the pen hits the paper. And I
Mm,
think that maybe one day you could give it to them, or you give it to them now, whatever you feel like you need to do. I think that it can be actually truly deep down healing for you to get it out.
yeah. Get it out. Even like I said, even if you don't give it to them ever, I do
Ever.
think there's power, because really you're also confessing it before the Lord. I mean, you're really verbally speak and read it out loud. Like,
Yeah.
say the things out loud, pretend that you're sitting in front of them. Even like I've done that kind of thing in counseling as well, where I
Yep.
write something down and pretend I'm saying it to them, and even just releasing the thoughts that you've been thinking for decades even, and saying it out loud, and you're finally being done with it
Right.
is freeing. There's so much freedom in that. And so I think that's wonderful. And I love that you were actually able to give it to your mom. And I think that's another way that you're taking another step forward and hopefully reconnecting in a new way. But it's two-sided. You know, it has to be on both sides. So don't write this letter in the heart posture of they better receive it and there's forgiveness on the other end, because it won't work the same. This is only on, it's the one exchange. It's the
Just for
one
you.
sided, just for
Yeah.
you. And yeah, so I love that.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share before I pray us out?
I think I got it all out. Laid
Awesome.
it
Thank
all
you.
out.
Seriously, thank you so much for this. I know it's like a really personal topic, but I do think so many of us kind of harvest these feelings about our parents, our childhood hurt or anything. And it grows little roots in our hearts and it stays with us forever. And it infiltrates all these areas of our lives and we don't even recognize it. So I hope this episode was healing for you guys. And if not, hopefully it stirred something in you where if you just had that alarm going off in your ear of like this person, this person, this person, I hope you know that God's calling you to reopen those doors and kind of go back into that space and really look at it. And so, yeah, I just want to pray over you guys and we'll see y'all next week. Dearly Father, Lord, just thank you so much for the listener that's listening to this. And I just want to pray over them and just meet with them where they're at right now. If they're having any ill feelings towards a parent, towards anyone really that they just cannot forgive for something that they've done, just comfort them first, but also just remind them that there's so much freedom in forgiveness and that you call us to forgive, not because you want to just pretend that this situation didn't happen, but because you love us so much that you do not want us to have revenge or a bitter heart, and that you want us to really experience life to the fullest with your love and your peace. And so I just pray over this person that is struggling with this, allow them to feel what they need to feel, but also step boldly into that next season of forgiveness and being able to learn how to do this and take that journey. Um, and yeah, we love you so much. We thank you so much for your word and this podcast, and just that we are able to just grow a community together like this. So, in your name, amen.
Amen. Bye, y'all.